Welcome back, guys, for another session on hidden knowledge, nothing new under the sun. Today, we are going to get into the book Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by
Second book. That's what we're working on right now.
yes, by Stephen R. Covey. As we jump in, there's some very interesting stuff we gotta talk about.
Hey, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's like a drug. It feels like a drug. You're reading one thing and you transition into the next, and it's just potent. I think just because you got something so fresh in your mind, the introduction to new information just kind of, it overwhelms you a little bit. Again, I'm Jonathan. What's good? Kurt. We on Earth. We a little discombobulated. We've like met up like 3 times today and kind of had a conversation.
Yeah,
it's like we got to stop talking and get to this book club, otherwise we can have nothing to say.
That's true.
But with that, part 1.
Oh man.
Part 1. How do you feel about it? What's the title? How do you feel about it?
So, part 1, we're talking about paradigms and principles, and you said something that changed a paradigm shift yesterday, and it basically relates to part 1, and it talks about how when your mindset changes at a fundamental level, you see something differently. So yesterday, I had an experience where I had to be at the range all day from 07, earlier than 06, all the way until 20:30. I got home yesterday for sure. But during that day, and matter of fact, none of it counted. And I was talking to Jonathan. He was like, "Oh yeah, the Army is just a book." And I was like, "Wait, what?" It's the leaders who makes our lives difficult. And I was like, "Whoa!" I had a paradigm shift there. Which brings me to Inside Out. The way I thought of it was the bullhorn from the last book that we read, that everything has to come from the inwards and then explode outwards.
Yeah.
I'll look at you, Jonathan.
The conversation that happened yesterday, just to kind of shine some light on it, we were supposed to do the book club yesterday, so today's Thursday. We ended up being a day behind, but I mean that's how life works. Military kind of pushes us in some direction sometimes, whether we want to go or not. And so what happened? I sent him a message like, "Hey, are we gonna do this today?" And he was like, "No, I'm out here stuck at the range. Sorry, I didn't get your message." And I was like, it's life. Things happen. Stuff happens. And he was like, "Yeah, it's kind of frustrating." And I was like, "Yeah, especially since it doesn't count." He didn't even realize it until he was out the range for a while. Once he realized it didn't count, it was just kind of like, that's frustrating. He was like, "Well, I've been here all day." I said, "Hey, but the Army's just a book. Don't be mad at the Army. The Army is a written down idea." And as I say that, it's going to mean something when we get to chapter 2. But it becomes imperative that we as people, when we receive information from the outside in, we have to understand where it's coming from, so that when we're echoing out, we're not just saying stuff. We can have 100,000 sayings. One of my favorite sayings that I hear people say is think outside the box. And when you say that to people, you have to be careful who you say it to. For the simple fact, like when you start a career, you could have been a manager at McDonald's and you come into the Army. Those two things don't match. So you don't really know. So you telling somebody coming from outside the Army into the Army with zero experience to think outside the box is telling them not to think at all. In my opinion, the way I look at it, you have to be able to put some tools in the box to look in the box before you start trying to think outside the box. And it comes to the same point. As you were out in there sitting there frustrated, hey, remember the Army's a book. You can sit down and study that book and figure out how to run a range better than the other people. So just observe, the chaos and absorb it and be like, okay, word. Like, what can I do so that next time I'm in a circumstance, I have more control over that? The more information we have, especially about ourselves, and I think that's what this started. The more information you have about yourself, how you're reacting to things and the impact you're having on them, the better outcome you can have. And they gave a couple examples. Some of them I don't really like because I just think they're kind of far-fetched. But as far as paradigms and principles, how did you see that going down, especially when it comes to like thinking from the inside out or being from the inside out?
So the way that I thought about it was, I went back to start with why, right? I feel like these 2 books build upon each other, not to endorse any authors or anything, but these 2 books definitely build on each other. In the fact that if you don't know why, and why comes from the inside, you most likely won't gonna know how. And it brings me back to a conversation that we've had on camera where we talked about like 9 out of 10 people don't know why they do what they do, and it's that sounds pretty scary, but the reality would probably be 9.5 people out of 10 don't know exactly why they do what they do.
Hey, I can't knock it. And there's also another saying that most of the statistics that we have, we just made up on the spot.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
Hey, so what it is there's a lot of people, and it touches on the last book that we read, which is Start With Why. There's a lot of people that don't know why. Like, and I guess it just goes to show that there are just maybe some natural followers or people that just decided to follow because it was the easiest path. But starting from the inside out and paradigm shift, I think this touched me. Actually, it frustrated me at first. I'll be honest. It frustrated me at first because as I started reading it, as you pointed out, it's repetitive information. I feel like what somebody did was steal all the food and then take all the vitamins out of it, give the food back, and be like, "Ha, you need this." It's not stuff that you're taught growing up that I think that you should be. Mm-hmm. And it's I call it root cause analysis when dealing with my kids. Why did you do that? Why did you do that? Why did you do it? Just tell me the truth. Why you know? Because I didn't want to do it. Okay, now I can deal with that. Go to your room. You know, I can deal with that. But keep telling, well, I don't know. What you mean you don't know? You took the candy because you wanted some candy. Like, you did that because you did that. Like, you know why you did it. And it just kind of, it's a very important thing for people. And I push my children in that way. Why? So that way, if you decide, like I tell my kids, you can either be Superman or you can be the Joker. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I like the Joker.
you're gonna have to decide. Mm-hmm. And whatever you decide, you have to know why. You want to go out here and be a super criminal? Once you move out, I'm good with it. You know what I'm saying? But if the police, you know what I'm saying, they come looking for you at my house, I'm sorry. If I didn't get my cut, then there's no conversation to be had. But at least you'll know why.
That's true.
So when you end up in prison, don't sit back and be like, well, I don't even know why I'm here. I don't know why I was doing the things I was doing. Because like I told you, hey, the judge ain't gonna want to hear that, and neither is the police.
That's true. That's true.
So don't try to sell it to me. You gotta know why, and you can tell me whatever you want. That paradigm shift for me has already happened.
So to build on that, actually, I read this quote today. I got it from Instagram. It says, "Give the kids the life you never had, not by buying the things that you never had, but by teaching them the lessons you never learned," right? Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really interesting, especially when it came from when he was talking about his son and how they used to baby his son when he was younger, because he sucked at sports and stuff like that. And going through the process, they realized that they were the problem.
They were enabling him.
Yeah, not really the son himself, but the problem was their parents. But for you to be able to admit something like that, you must have some good self-reflection, which brought me to where he started talking about like the personality ethics versus the character ethics. I'm like, before because people always say, hey, personality, right? I actually learned the difference between personality and character the first time I read half of this book, if I'm being quite honest.
How would you sum that up, the difference between personality and character?
So for me, personality is the mask that we wear for society, and character is who we are when no one's looking.
So I agree with you, right? And I have a different way of saying it, especially because I sit down and talk to my kids about a lot of stuff. Your personality is like grease. It gets you through life. Mm-hmm. Because I've worked with in the military a lot of people that I didn't agree with. Some cheating on their husbands, cheating on their wives and stuff like that. But I still had to work with them. So I had to make it easy for them to slide by. Whereas my character, so with when it comes to character, I wouldn't invite those same people to my house. Mm-hmm. I can deal with them at work and in that close environment when I had to. I can deploy with them. I can do what I had to, but I didn't necessarily like everything that they were about, and I didn't agree with it. So that was just kind of like, hey, when you go by, you're not really, nothing's sticking to me. That's just, it is what it is. Okay, I don't agree with it, but I'm not going to argue about it either. Whereas my character, that's my wife and kids, we go downstairs, I sit down with them, and it's not that I don't accept their flaws and faults and allow them to grow, but I don't allow bad behavior to develop from it. Like I wouldn't let my 14-year-old son, going on 15, if I found out that he was talking to another girl behind his girlfriend's back, I would sit down and say, hey, you don't get to do that. You know what I'm saying? That's bad character. If you want to be with her, then be with her. If you want to be with her, be with her. If you want to be with both of them, then you should bring both of them together and be man enough to sit down and tell them that's what you want. What you don't get to do is go behind anybody's back and do wrong, because I wouldn't encourage that. When you have that moment where you recognize growth in yourself is how I view this segment, right? Because that paradigm, like you said, when I told you the Army's a book, you were like, wait, it's like you have a moment where like, I'm looking at this all wrong. How do you capitalize on, because that's a moment of power.
That is.
How do you capitalize on it? How do you view those moments when it, like, relatively speaking, when we're talking about habits?
So, like, I'm a big Vikings fan. Like, you know, the TV show, the Vikings.
Yeah.
So
King Ragnar.
Ragnar. So, but it's not him who
like
caught, like, it's a very interesting character for me. Like, it's Athelstan. Like, I do like Ragnar, but Athelstan. And in this one particular episode, Athelstan.
So Athelstan, he's the one that they found when they went to England,
mm-hmm.
and the priest that he brought back. Okay,
yes. Who became Viking and was Viking and doing all these crazy stuff. One day he was looking at the light, and the light hit him in his eyes, right? He fell back, and then he had lost his faith and then found it again. And in that moment, he held on to his faith tighter than before, I guess, in a sense, which ultimately led to his death, right? But when we're talking, for some reason, when I was reading it, particularly listening to it, actually, I thought of that moment, because it's like within that moment, like you have so much conviction, like if we think about focus, right? Focus in a sense where you're just focusing on a pen. The Chinese, I believe, conducted this experiment where they cursed at one rice and praised one rice for an extended period of time, and after a certain time, one decayed and one seemed to glow with healing properties, right?
Yeah.
Or become pure. And so I think with a lot of focus, like if you put a lot of focus on one thing, there's so much power within that moment. And so I think a paradigm shift, right? What happens to a lot of people is they'll have a paradigm shift, but not the conviction and the discipline to stick with it. So it's like we know better. Those who know better should do better, but those who don't should not, right? But then those who know better but don't do better is worse than the people who don't, right? So that paradigm shift gives you so much power, but because you have so much power, let's say you use it to take advantage of other people, right?
Yeah.
You then start, the laws of the universe are now working against you instead of working for you. And so, like, I think the power of a paradigm shift is in accordance with natural laws, right? And natural laws in this case is laws not defined by man, but by the all or everything, right?
Yeah.
And so once you are in that paradigm shift, you're able to operate with a lot of power. And that right there, I think, brings you the closest you have or will be to the makings of this universe.
As I heard you say, it's like it's a point of recreation. Not recreation, but recreation. A point where something gets your attention, and then it just kind of, you know what it's like? You ever walked into a dark room and then your ears perk up, like you hear the ding, like you just become aware that the room is dark, and like your spidey sense kicks in. Yeah, I don't know if I'm explaining that right.
I've been in dark rooms,
but you never heard the ping.
I never heard the ping.
Okay, well, I mean, so I don't know if you ever been in the woods at night.
Yeah,
and you're walking, and then you have like this. It's almost like your adrenaline kicked in and you just hear stuff and you become super aware. That is how I define a paradigm shift, or not how I describe having one.
Okay.
When I come onto a piece of information that makes me stop and go like, wait. Like, I've been looking at this, and I don't want to say the word wrong. I've been looking at this without this piece of information, and this piece of information changed everything.
Change your perspective.
It's. I mean, you can call it change of perspective, change of perception. I would say it's a change in everything. Like, you're just sitting there, and in that moment, nothing can destroy what you just learned. It's almost, like I said, it's almost like you come into power.
I think I know what you're talking about. So the other morning, right? It was pretty dark in the house early, around like 4 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
So I turned my flashlight on. I pointed down there, and when the light hit something, that's when I could see the room, right? So while walking around the house, I started just turning off and turning on the light, and I was like, "That's interesting." I was like, "Light and darkness with nothing to bounce off of gives shape to nothing at all." So I thought it started thinking of myself in the forest, just like imagining myself in the forest with the flashlight and just beaming a light straight out across the water, not seeing anything at all, wondering if my flashlight is working, right? And then like pointing it to just a specific focus, a specific object, seeing that shape and seeing everything come into view. I think that's a very good way to describe a paradigm shift.
Yeah, and it has a lot to do with focusing on the thought, and that's real. This is the next part of it is seeing and being, and the first sentence I think highlights a lot of things to me because as we grow, everything's not instantaneous. So I'm gonna read the first sentence. It said, "Of course, not all paradigm shifts are instantaneous. Sometimes you walk into power, and sometimes you just end up there. Like sometimes you can sit down and be watching something, and it'll just something will just dawn on you. Like I wouldn't even like. Wait a minute, that's interesting. That's a good thought." And just like you say, I keep referencing that you at the range yesterday when I said that, you immediately was like, "Yo, like you just changed." Like I was sitting there, like you just changed everything, and it's a game changer in that thought. But sometimes it's you've been in the Army for 3 years and you've been trying to learn this equipment and somebody comes in and is like, "Hey, if you just look at it this way," and even though you've been trying for a long time, now it's like, "Oh, okay, so this actually functions like this." The explanation of signal flow and all that kind of makes sense. Wasn't that you I had that conversation with when we drew I think we was talking about right before you got married, we were talking about signal and how you want your relationships to be super high frequency, very high frequency. Okay, so yeah. Kind of in that sense where it was kind of like, oh crap, like I'm looking at this and it makes sense now, but I've been dealing with this whole time, and now we kind of come to this point. What do you think about it?
I think of like, so I feel like we go through like 3 very basic, very natural paradigm shifts in our lives, and that is one, going from a state of, I'd say, pure bliss to reality or a focus. This is when, as babies, we realize that not everything is gravy. A baby's always happy. They cry. They cry when they want food or when they need to be changed.
Yeah.
And as they gradually grow up, they are forced into a domesticated situation. Granted, where they are on the, I would say, privilege food chain. I just call it the chain of privilege. Is either top, bottom, or in the middle, or somewhere in between each segment.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, they get, and that right there helps shape their character and who they're gonna be. I think that's the first paradigm shift, is the inner buildings, whether you're gonna be a very strong person or not. I think comes from there. I believe come from there. The second paradigm shift, I would say, come when you're 16. So when you want to be independent, and I think that starts in your 12, 12, not 16, 12, 12 to 16. And then when you are sometimes, and I can't put the last shift on that paradigm, but it's from, I'd say from 12 to like maybe 32. You're in that stage before life dawns on you and you realize, hey, it's not just about me. It's about how I react or reflect off other people. And that's why the book, I believe, Think and Grow Rich, was talking about, that's why men who are men and women after the age of 40 is when they really start hitting their prime of knowledge. Because I think that's when that third paradigm shift really hits and you start to see the world from a different perspective. You're not as eager to do stuff. You'll be more like thoughtful and thorough. And you've already accumulated so many life experiences from it. You gradually came into that paradigm shift.
Okay. I mean, I can see it that way. I mean, it makes sense. I like it. I don't think I could have said it better. Sometimes you just don't see things coming because a lot of people tell you the mistake they made, but they don't tell you how it led up to it. And again, that's a root cause analysis circumstance. And so then we go into, and I'm sure everybody's heard this story, right? The principle-centered paradigm. And so I remember hearing this when I was a kid. And the moral of it was, what happens when an unstoppable power meets an immovable object? And it just goes, and it doesn't really apply to people, because I don't think people are structured that way. You're not absolutely a thing. You can change your mind. Like, you're not a rock. You're not something that was built by someone by hand for a specific purpose. So in this example, the principle is to try to get, I think, for everybody to see that you, just because you are who you say you are, doesn't mean you always have to be it. You're not the boat or the lighthouse. You can change direction or this, that, and the third. Like, the boat captain didn't ask any questions.
That's true.
He was just very stern on what he was and did not seek to receive understanding from somewhere else. Again, it's one of those things outside, and I know what I am, so that's not the question. The question is, what are you that you can't move?
I kind of see it from a very different angle, I think.
What is it?
So I thought about it in the sense where, you know, those people who just think like of themselves so highly that they're unwilling to bend for another person. That's kind of the vibe that I got from the captain. Hey, adjust your angle 20 degrees to get out of my way, right? And the reply, it's kind of like, you know, this hard person and life is like, no, you adjust your angle 20 degrees to get out of my way. You know what I mean? And like, when I thought about it, it kind of become like so humorous. Like, I couldn't help but like laugh. I went back at it, listened to it twice, and I was like, what made you think that you can just use your position, right? And in this instant, your rank, to bully a lighthouse out of your way without asking the proper questions, right? It was just kind of like, hey, I'm a captain, get out of my way. And it's like, okay. And the guy kind of said his rank back, hey, I'm such and such. You adjust 20 degrees and get out of my way, right? I thought about it as the person who think they're and life who's and like an unmendable circumstance, and they think they could just bully their way past it, as they always do. And what they either come to the realization that, hey, you're gonna collide head on with this issue, or if you're smart enough, you will take the advice or heedings or the warning leading up to such a circumstance and adjust your angle slightly to get out of that situation entirely.
And that makes a lot of sense. I look at it and I put it as as I relook at it, you know, you just look at it like two people walking down the sidewalk towards each other.
Oh, that's funny.
One of them having a bad day decides, I'm not going to move, not realizing that the other one is blind and tapping a stick on the ground, just decides to keep walking into the person so they trip over the stick. And it's very funny. So I think the principle is hard to pin down. Is it the rock's responsibility to explain itself, or is it your responsibility as a person to be flexible? I think this goes back to starting with why, and it touches on so many other things that I've read throughout my life or encountered, where people are asking for shortcuts, not experiences. And I think you said it earlier where we kind of touched on it a minute ago, where I was like, the issue is when you have a conversation with someone and you end up making the same mistake that they made. Nobody told you what they went through to get there. And you have to sit down and look at things from a perspective of, like you said, the road has to be traveled. That doesn't mean you have to make the same mistakes, but you have to know what the pitfalls were before you got there. So when you look at people who want to go and it's like, oh, I got to get rich. Oh, you want to get rich? Let's go flip this. Well, flipping a house requires a lot of experience. It requires a lot of knowledge and it requires a lot of money. You have to put yourself in the position to flip the house. But I don't want to say everybody, that's just how we talk. But you get into the circumstance where everybody, oh, let's go do this. And it's just going to happen like that. Like, for instance, I'm learning how to play the stock market right now, and I have to teach myself not to be emotional about the money. And the way I did that was I sit down. Number one, I had to rationale to myself. Me and my wife sat down and talked. You got $500 you put into this account. Well, then we could use that $500 for something else. Yeah, but you know what we could also do? What we've been doing. So when you sit down and you think about it, it's like I can go play poker, we can go to the movies, and we can have these little experiences, or I can learn how to do this with this 500. We can not do that for a little while, go back to what we're doing, and maybe I can turn that into some other money. But that still requires me to not try to get rich quick. I have to sit there and understand how the market's fluctuating, when are the times to get in, when are the times to get out, and then discipline myself to be like, hey, because I'm going to tell you the first couple times I made a trade, I got scared and I pulled out too fast. Then I stayed in too long and didn't pull out fast enough. And then I got to the point where it was like, it doesn't even matter. I want to pull out at this amount. Whether I think it's going to go up or not, as soon as it hits this amount, I'm going to take out. Mm-hmm. And so I had to teach myself that discipline to go in, set it, and forget it. Hey, came out. Hey, I made $500 yesterday. Dope. I could have made $650 just by that 15 cents, but doesn't matter. I got to be happy with what I got. I just doubled my money. Why would I be mad about that? Mm-hmm. And so I just kind of had to move on from that. And I think that this is what this touched on. When you're trying to get rich, you have to change. In order to accept information, in order to have that paradigm shift, you have to accept the change.
So in my culture, we have a saying, shortcut, draw blood, which basically means like shortcuts, like taking a shortcut all the time in the long run can be can put you at such a bad disadvantage because you use such a short time to get ahead. And then someone else said something. Someone said the people who watch the lose 20 pounds in 10 days videos very quick are people with low self-esteem. And I would say the truth applies to the people who try to get rich quick. And I don't mean to offend anyone, but this is just my opinion, which I believe to be true, right?
Yeah.
So if you had the discipline, right, to spend just 40 minutes a day in the gym every day, clean your diet up, right? Let me not say diet, and establish a healthy eating pattern. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and build yourself that lifestyle. You wouldn't need try to lose 20 pounds quick because you think you need to fit in a pants and or a dress or whatever it is your preference is.
I concur.
And then when it comes to money, if you didn't think you had the necessary skills to get rich over a longer period of time, which would basically teach you all the rules of money, how to keep your money, how to spend your money, how to multiply it and stuff like this. Let's say, okay, you did get rich tomorrow. You won the lottery, right? You won $100-something million. Statistics shows that within 5 years, majority of them goes broke anyways. And why? Because they just wanted to get rich quick. They didn't learn the rules to keep your money and to make your money multiply. And so they doubt their own ability. Mm-hmm. And so they have to look outside themselves to get something fast, which they're going to lose anyways.
I agree. And that brings us to the next segment, because I agree and I also disagree. Mm-hmm. The way we see the problem is the problem. What you just presented was a problem. How you looked at it is also a problem, right? Sure. Because when you talk about rich and wealth, you have to understand how it was created in the first place and why it's almost impossible for someone who wasn't born into money to get it. And I think, what was the first book that you had me read before we started the book club?
12 Laws of Human Nature.
Was it the 12 Laws of Human Nature where that guy was talking? He moved outside himself. Somebody was.
Interview with the Devil. Outwitting the Devil.
Yeah, Outwitting the Devil.
Outwitting the Devil.
And I remember that guy talking. He was like, I've made all these businesses and I've done all this and I've done that and I've done this. And I was like, as I kept listening to him, I got frustrated because he was like, yeah, I called my friend. Your friend was a millionaire. What you talking about? You was having issues. Tyrone don't get to meet a millionaire. So
that's true.
When you're in a situation, fast money doesn't mean being good money, but it also doesn't equal fast money.
Yes, sure.
You know what I'm saying? Because when you talk about what a dope dealer goes through, they spend more time in jail and more time on the corner trying to make money than if you actually did the hourly calculation. Unless you're Don Julio or whoever, you know what I'm saying? Unless you're the pimp, you're not making that much money. You're barely scraping by. So fast money is literally like people used to throw rent parties back in the day.
Rent party.
You know what I'm saying? Where you couldn't afford your rent, so you threw a party and you charged people headed to the door. Your friends showed up. Everybody paid $5 to get in so that you could pay your rent.
Holy shit. Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So that was fast money. We need some money. Hey, let's throw a party and charge people $5 a head to come over here and hang out. Da 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 da. When we read the book, Stand from the Beginning and stuff like that, when you sit down and look at the structure of society, there was, for some people, the only way to get money was fast. And that's where that term came from. But when you look at the actual problem of trying to get rich fast, you pay more in than you're ever going to get out. I can go spend $5 a month every month for 20 years playing the lottery. And then finally win. I'm paying the government taxes. They're going to rip it up at the beginning. And then I have to pay all the debt that I've accumulated while I was broke. Mm-hmm. And then I have to do this because we've been taught to look at what the actual problem is as an external factor. I have to keep going in here and busting my butt instead of sitting back like, oh, I need to go get this college degree. Why don't you go learn to become a plumber? Why don't you learn to be a handyman? Why don't you learn to do these things? Because that would be faster. You would have learned the skill faster doing that than you would have trying to win the lottery. 18-year-olds, I wager we look this up. I want to know how many 18-year-olds have ever won the lottery.
Which got me to this chapter that
a new level of thinking.
Right? So
I'm about to hook you up.
So they said something which was, the author said something which was very significant. He said, you can't solve a problem with the same level of thinking that you got to create it. And I feel like Soren Gray at some point change his thought patterns because he gets a lot more done from his soldiers now.
So you remember that story I told you about when I was in boot camp and my drill instructor got fired right before he went to the range? Mm-hmm. They tried to dupe us emotionally. Yeah. Under normal circumstances, right? Here's a new level of thinking for the young fellow. Under a normal circumstance, when an NCO is promoted, they used to move them to different units so they couldn't be around their friends. So did Sergeant Gray have a paradigm shift, or did he cause everyone to have a paradigm shift? So you have to look at the problem with different eyes, right? Because what happened was he got promoted, so he developed authority. So what he did was have a very drastic overreaction. I'm not saying he did it on purpose. I'm just saying what he did was genius. Because what he did was he made everybody that he was friends with not like him anymore. And then he reapproached them with, hey, sorry, but this is the position I'm in now. I overreacted. But you have to understand what it is I'm trying to do. I'm now in charge and I'm now responsible and I need everybody to react accordingly. And they were like, oh man, we forgive you. Okay, but y'all gotta understand, we just can't have the same relationship anymore. But he already broke the relationship. Under normal circumstances, y'all would have just got a new NCO that came in and was like, hey, this is what's going on. The last guy's gone, da da da. But since they didn't move him, he had no choice but to change. You know what I'm saying? It's like when my kids, I tell my kid, hey, I love you. You know what I'm saying? But we're not fucking friends. We're not friends because I pay for every fucking thing you do. We will be friends when you move the fuck out and I can go to your house and break some of your shit. Then we'll be friends. You know what I'm saying? Because now we both have the same stake in the game.
Yes, sure.
The stake in the game changed for him. He did y'all a favor, and it was an ingenious favor whether you saw it or not. Whether he knew it or not, he did what was necessary for everybody to grow up in the circumstance. And now he can be chill, and they know inside of him he can be an asshole. They don't want to deal with it.
Uncomfortable new situations get you to grow very fast.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And those are all paradigm shifts to sit down and have with your wife. To sit down, and I think like right here, the inside out approach says the private victories precede public victories.
That's true.
You have to be willing to sit down and look at yourself and say, I could have handled that better. So, hey, I'm tripping.
I had a lot of those. Like when I'm sitting there, like, did I really have to do that? Or maybe I could have done that.
Yeah, and it's a thing. But it's a beautiful thing at the same time. So as that being said, when we go into the next piece and we do, as we understand chapter 1, like how would you sum up chapter 1?
I would sum up chapter 1 as an introduction for what's really about to come place. Like it talks about paradigm paradigm shift. It established what personality is, the difference between personality and character. Also talked about like established change and established peace. I think I'm jumping up a bit too
No,
far.
you're good. You're good.
PC and your build what you want and what you're gonna do to get it.
Got to take care of your assets.
Mm-hmm. And so, like as chapter one grows, it basically unravels some of the core, I would say, ethics that you need to have and need to realize that are there in order for you to grow as a person, be a husband or wife or a child, whatever you are, and how to approach the world.
It is. And so my synopsis on this whole chapter is something that I say all the time. Stop spending so much time looking at other people and pay attention to yourself. And I think that what I got from this, I mean, and these chapters are long, is that you are the problem and the solution. You personally are the problem and the solution. And with that, I mean, you hold all the power. And it's not to say, I think the difference in it is, and what I'm trying to allude to is like, we put ourselves in situations that make us feel powerless only because we're unwilling to make the decision to remove ourselves from it.
That's true.
7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think the synopsis of chapter 1 is to get you to look at yourself and also to get you to look at the why you're involved in something and then how it's affecting you based on why you're interacting with it, like truly. From the inside out, I sit down and I look at my son and I say, hey man, like if you would adhere to these things, you would be 10 times what I am. I don't give a damn what you want to do. I know that if you develop discipline in everything that you do, you will be 10 times what I am because I didn't pick that up until I was way over here. But I know that about me. What about you? What do you see? You know what I'm saying? He's a little kid. You don't know. He just said, I don't know. And okay, word. Go practice this. Go practice that. Go look at that. I take him to the wood shop. Get your hands on stuff. Hey, this kid can now, whether he likes it or not, can grow plants in days. You know what I'm saying? Like he does that, and you sit back, and when he talks about it now, whether he knows it or not, he gets giddy. You know what I'm saying? He's like, I grew up my tomato plant. I remember one day that the dog ate his cucumber plant outside. He came in the house and he was destroyed. And I was like, and that's how I feel when you break my shit. You know what I'm saying? Lesson. And I was like, but I'm sad that the dog did that. You know what I'm saying? But now you got to figure out where you're going to put that so the dog can't get to it. It took me days to grow that. I finally got it to grow and I knew what to do with the soil and blah, blah. So now you can replicate the process. But when I sit there and look at it, that is his ability to see in science for himself and understand what he is and who he is and how he is. And that's the lesson that I reiterate. Hey, what you going to do with your life? I don't know. And I said, hey, if you're going to do anything, if you don't know in the meantime, the least you can do is make some money. Go join the Marine Corps because they will give you discipline even if you don't want it. And then go to school after your first year. Go learn your job, go overseas, and then go to school. And after that first year, get all your prerequisites out the way and save your money. I said, after that, that gives you power of choice.